All right, y'all. Welcome to the Badass Ball Player Day 29. In this section, we're going to talk a little bit about fear and different types of fear and how to overcome fear and how to deal with it and manage it. So first and foremost, let's just talk about what it is. What is fear? So obviously it's an emotion. If y'all figured that out. But it's an emotional response to a dangerous situation or having thoughts about danger or that there might be danger. Okay. And so it is the natural, if you've heard of the fight or flight response, which you have, because we've talked about it in the stress lesson, but essentially, right, that's that natural response that happens when there's a perceived threat. Like if there's a big loud noise, you're gonna startle, right? It's a ingrained response to legitimate danger and threat, right? So it's a little bit of a reflex, but it's also something that you can turn on by your thinking, okay? And so if we go back to our mind-body connection, when something happens, so an event is happening, if you perceive it in a way that you perceive that situation to be dangerous or uncertain or, in a particular way, it's going to fuel fear. And that fear is obviously going to produce that fight or flight response in you because that's its purpose, okay, to keep you safe, to be able to help you be able to fight or flee away from the threat, from the scary thing, okay? So there's very specific types of thoughts that drive fear. And there's a lot of research about this that are the specific thoughts that we have in any given moment, the way we interpret the situations around us can fall into different themes. And it's a lot like movie genres. So for instance, when you go to your Netflix queue and you look up, there's the whole list of like genres, right? Of types of movie that you want to watch. So you might want to watch, a comedy or a thriller or action or romance or insert blah, 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 right? And what we know, as the research has shown, is that there are predictable patterns between the themes of our thinking and the types of emotions and reactions that they produce. So very predictably, right, when you are watching a comedy, you can expect to feel happy, laugh. It's going to be funny, produce um, laughter, right? If you see a drama, you might feel sad, or if you see a horror movie, right, you're going to be scared. So we have similar themes in our thinking, some basic categories that our thoughts can fall into. And we know with high frequency that if you're having a thought in that particular theme, it drives certain emotions and reactions. They call it action potentials. And anyway, long story short, what tends to produce fear is the theme known as danger. And danger thoughts, you're interpreting the situation that you're in as something bad might happen. There is a threat. Something is unknown or unclear. And if you're having thoughts that fall into that theme, it tends to produce something, an emotion on the end of on the spectrum of anxiety, and you tend to respond with some form of agitation, right? So fear is on the very high end of the anxiety spectrum. It's somewhere at the high end, right? Maybe not quite as bad as terrified, but it's somewhere in that high end, okay? So really what's producing fear is your interpretation of the situation or a reflex to a legitimately like loud startle noise or something. So if somebody jumps behind you and like grabs you from behind, like that startle, like like your heart's going to jolt, like, so there's a little bit of a reflex there. It's not only driven by our thinking, but a lot of it is driven by our thinking. Okay. And so that's specifically the type of fear that we're going to address. Okay. So fear is just a signal. As any emotion is, like pain, it's a signal, right? Something in your body is hurt, or happy, right? It's a signal that you're having a good time, right? Things are going well. So any emotion is a signal, but specifically fear, it's a signal of these two things. It's either a signal of immediate problem or danger, which is kind of more that reflex fear that we experience, right? It's designed to help keep you safe. So that negativity bias that we talked about in the first lesson, or the lesson about the 3 good things. It's a natural inclination to notice and remember negative things. Again, it's a safety mechanism. So it's good that you feel fear from time to time. And we'll talk about that here in a sec. But then it can also be a non-urgent signal. So it's not in response to a specific threat or something, a situation that's actually dangerous, life, limb, or eyesight, but it's a non-urgent signal that if you're scared or very highly fearful about a situation, there might be a need for change. And so this is what we're going to be talking about. So the first kind of signal, immediate problem or danger, right? These are the actually dangerous situations. So your physical presence, your being, your life is in harm's way or something like that. So if you're legitimately in a dangerous situation, harmful situation, or unsafe situation, in those cases, like, fear is really, really good, right? It energizes you and focuses you on the problem, address the threat, helps you flee, fight, right? Get out of there, right? It helps you address the situation. Okay. That kind of fear, really good. We want that fear. It's productive. The problem is we turn this level of fear on for situations when our actual life, limb, eyesight is not in danger. Okay. And if that's the case, it's simply a non-urgent signal. And this can often clue us in that maybe we need to prepare, or maybe we need to address some misconceptions about the situation, especially if you're thinking about an unknown or uncertainty. Or if you're just thinking a situation is dangerous, but it's not actually dangerous. It's really just uncomfortable, right? That you're skewing your perspective. You're turning on a bunch of fear that you don't actually need. So the non-urgent signal version is really helping us it's a signal that, hey, maybe I need to prepare. Maybe I need to address my doubts, worries, and fears to be in a better place, right? So it's information, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do poorly moving forward. Okay. So often when we're experiencing these negative emotions, we are thinking about our training. When we're thinking about our training or performances in a way that it doesn't serve us. So our mind-body connection, we are perceiving the situation as dangerous, uncertain, unknown. There's a threat. When it's maybe not physically a threat. So being able to adjust your thinking or your perceptions about whatever that situation is, whether it's losing a game, having a disagreement with your coach or parents, maybe it's a failure moment, a growth opportunity, the way you perceive those situations matters. Okay. And we want to ideally adjust our thinking so you're not producing so much fear. So there's 3 options to fight fear. The first is recognize the potential problem and act if necessary. So those are for the legitimately dangerous situations. For non-actual life-threatening situations, you have the next 2, which is adjusting your thinking or practicing acceptance. Okay. So we're going to focus on one of these today, and then throughout the rest of the week, we'll hit a few more of these. So first and foremost, separating appropriate fear from maybe discomfort, or just noticing the difference between when I'm actually in harm's way versus not. Okay. So if you recognize a potential problem or a situation that you're in that's producing like fear, like, oh my gosh, my life might be in danger kind of fear, that's important. That's a really important signal. You need to pay attention to that. Okay. And ideally, you do something to get yourself back to safety. You take action, you call for help, you do what you got to do. Okay. If you're feeling that level of fear for some situation in your training environment, so with a coach, batting coach, something along those lines, it's important to speak up, to share that with whether it's your parents or a trusted adult, a friend, something. Okay. You have the right to feel safe, and you should feel safe. Coaches should be people for you, or adults in your life should be people for you. that can protect you, that can be a safe haven for you. So if you're ever not feeling that, making sure you find a trusted adult to talk about that, and maybe you need to address it. Maybe you have a coach who's really, really angry and yells all the time, and that's making you feel really unsafe to be there, psychologically unsafe. That's important too. So take action. Don't be don't be afraid to be afraid. But if that's what you're really feeling, address it. Consider what specific action you could take to help make necessary change and move towards success. And you don't have to do that alone, right? Find a trusted adult in your life, and get them to help you, because obviously that's important. Okay. But for the most part, we're going to talk about the other kind of fear. Okay. So we're going to think more about adjusting our thinking. So if the situation is there's no actual harm, emotional harm, nobody's abusing you, nobody's threatening you with physical harm, anything like that, then we're going to focus more on the mental side. Okay, adjusting our thinking. So one of the ways to do that, for whatever reason, in the last 20 years, our culture, so your parents, their parents, or your school system, our current government, etc., have created an environment where we're protecting you from failing. And that's sending a message that you're fragile, right? That we've got to clear the path for you and make everything easy. Unfortunately, life just isn't easy. Doesn't matter how easy we make things for you when you're growing up. Life is hard. Adulting is hard. Relationships are hard. So understanding that as a human being, you are not fragile, right? A fragile is something that can easily be broken, can't heal itself, right? So if you think of like glass mugs, teacups, all that kind of stuff, softball bats, even, you break a lot of softball bats. Okay. Fragile, right? Something that breaks pretty easily, and it's very difficult to put back together, or you can't put it back together. Okay. You are not that. It might feel like it sometimes, but you are not fragile. As humans, you're designed to be very resilient. So you're designed to withstand shocks and drops, and something like a plastic cup or a rubber ball. Okay. And we talked a little bit about this in the stress response, right? Stress is necessary for you to grow. You are a dynamic being that needs to be able to adapt, that you need stress in your life to get better, to grow, to make your muscles stronger, all that kind of stuff. So you are designed to be a resilient system. Okay. So what we need to do is make sure that you're not perceiving yourself as a fragile entity. So we're going to move towards this idea of being anti-fragile. So an anti-fragile system is a system like our stress response, our immune system, that requires stress and challenge in order to learn, adapt, and grow. And systems that are anti-fragile, for instance, your immune system, when they're not challenged with germs and bugs and all that kind of stuff, they become weak because they're not practicing fighting off things. And so that when something new comes into your blood system, if you're not used to fighting things off, your body doesn't know how to fight things off, and you get sick. Okay. So you as a human are designed the same way. You are anti-fragile, and you're going to become weak and rigid and inefficient if you're never challenged or pushed to respond. So one of the big ways that you can help address fear is to remind yourself that you are anti-fragile, right? You are resilient. You are designed to be a resilient human being. Okay. And what that means is that you can take a pounding, mental and emotional and physical pounding. Doesn't mean it's going to be pleasant. Okay. But you're going to grow, you're going to adjust, you're going to learn. And that's part of life. Okay. So life is not easy. It's not fair. And what we know is that right now, starting at whatever age you're at, if you start to learn to practice and deal with failure now, while you have lots of support around you, you can grow your resilience muscles. You can grow your anti-fragile muscles, right? You can get good at being resilient and practicing the tools and the skills to help you push through even when you are fearful. So remember that stress is good for you. It's necessary for growth. Right? And so there's no need to fear a failure moment or a stressful situation. So that means you can think about it differently and therefore not cause as much fear or anxiety for you. So it's an opportunity to grow and learn. And please always remember the mantra, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Okay. So a way to reframe failure, this is one of my favorite little reframes here, is thinking a failure, fail, to fail, is an acronym. It means first attempt in learning. And when you fail, that's okay. It's part of being human. You're going to fail. And so if you just treat it, all right, that was my first attempt in learning, I'm going to try it again. It's a really helpful way to proceed, make sure that you're thinking about failure in a way that you don't start to fear it. If something is the end, right? END, effort never dies. You can use that. NO means next opportunity. So these are just additional ways to think about the things you might be scared of. If you can make an acronym and remember these small things, it could help you reframe that. Oh, that's not so scary, right? And when a parent tells you no, or a coach tells you no, or a teacher tells you no, right? If it's an opportunity you're trying to get, like, hey, no, you can't go out with your friends this night. All right, next opportunity. Well, that might be a little harder to stomach, but anyway, it's something to consider. Okay, but the big one there is the fail, first attempt in learning. Okay, so learning to reframe your thinking is really important. Another thing you can consider is this idea of courage. So courage, it's not necessarily the opposite of failure, but it's an antidote to, fear, I should say, not the opposite of failure, but the opposite of fear. This is a quote from the author of researcher from the Courage Quotient. And I thought this really stuck with me when I read it. So I want to read it to you all. Okay, courage is the shortest route to a good life. Fears are all very normal and rational, but fear holds us back from actions that would make life rich and rewarding. People who live fully engaged lives are exhibiting some measure of courage. Courage indicates that willingness to try. However, fear is also a gift, and self-doubt is a gift with enormous signaling value. Remember, we talked about I'm scared of something. I might need to prepare more. I might need to adjust. Okay. But you don't want fear to hold you back unless it should. It's a balancing act. Courage is also the wisdom of knowing when to act and when not to act. Okay. So courage, building your courage muscles is also a way to address fear, recognizing that fear is a natural and normal emotion. It's okay to be scared of certain situations. But the more you practice your courage and your bravery, the easier it is to overcome those moments and to act in spite of being a little bit fearful or scared. Okay, so how can bravery and courage help you? So bravery and courage is the ability to do what needs to be done despite having fear. So sometimes it's just acknowledging that I am afraid, and that's okay, but I can still act even though I am a little bit scared. And unfortunately, a lot of us fall into those, especially at your age as teenagers, but also in general as humans, we have what's called courage blindness. And we often don't see the different ways that we're being courageous. So there's most people associate bravery and courage with something like a soldier, protecting his buddy while he's getting shot at to give him first aid or something like that, right? Yeah, of course, that is certainly a type of bravery. We would call that in the literature physical bravery. So it's the act of you act in spite of being fearful of bodily harm or injury, right? Physically being brave, putting yourself in a situation where physical harm could happen. So police officers, firemen, all that kind of stuff. But that's not the only way to be brave. You can have moral bravery, which is doing what you know to be right in spite of the fear that people might make fun of you or exclude you, right? So moral bravery is really important, sticking up for your values and sticking up for what you know is right. Okay. There's also what we call psychological bravery, which is simply facing your anxieties and your fears, despite the potential of being uncomfortable or losing stability. And what we mean is things might change, or unpleasant circumstances, right? Knowing that it might not feel good, but you choose to face that anxiety anyway. And that's a form of bravery too. And so thinking about not writing off, right, this courage blindness, not writing off the small acts of courage and bravery that you engage in a regular basis. For instance, like, oh, I was just doing what anyone would do. Or if I was brave, I would ... when in reality, you are often being brave, either morally or psychologically, or sometimes physically. Okay. So today's task, I know this is a bit of a long lesson talking about fear, but we're going to work on kind of overcoming that bravery blindness, that courage blindness. So start to develop your courage muscles. So thinking back across this past week or two, and name all of the ways that you've been either physically brave, morally brave, or psychologically brave. Even if it's a small moment, like choosing to raise your hand in class for a question that you're like, I don't know. Or maybe it was standing up to a teammate who was bullying somebody else. Or maybe it was simply speaking when your coach said something that you didn't think was accurate or right. They were trying to coach you on something. You're like, well, that's not accurate, coach. Like, this is what happened. Something along those lines. Okay. So reflect a little bit on the past 2 weeks of your life and start to build a list of all the ways that you were courageous this week, and start to notice that the better you get at little small moments of courage, the easier it is to be courageous moving forward. Okay. And so that you can overcome that fear, hopefully by rethinking your situation, but also recognizing it's okay to be scared. You can be courageous and push through that scare and that fear. Okay. So give that a shot for today. Make this list and let's start building your courage muscles.